How about we talk about us today?
Let's do it.
All right. We've gotten some questions over the past few months about how we navigate being married and running a business together. So we're going to dive into, I saved a bunch of the questions. I added a few extra that I thought were going to be helpful. And we'll just go ahead and start from the beginning, how it all started.
All right. What's the first question?
Did you ever think you would run a business together when you first met?
I don't think we had that much foresight. I think to give full context, when we got married, we were 22. So we're both fresh out of college, me more recent than you, although I'm older than you because I'm married to a prodigy child. And so everything was moving extremely fast when we got married. So I don't think we had much planning at all at that time.
Well, also to give a little bit more context, we both had our own coaching businesses at that time. So you were running physique development, and then I had the very creative Sue Gaines coaching, which if you guys need any help naming your businesses, then let me know. So we were doing those separately. And I think at the time, it just felt that they were still very separate. And at the beginning of our relationship, when we were still like dating and engaged, and if you don't know, we got engaged within 6 months of meeting. And so it was still pretty new. So starting and going into business together, I don't think was at the forefront of our minds.
Right. The clientele was different for both of us too. Like at the time, I was very focused on just competitors almost. I didn't have a ton of lifestyle, if I'm remembering correctly. Is that true?
Yeah, probably at that point, It was definitely leaning more towards competitors.
Okay.
And you had been coaching for longer as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And so it was something where I kind of felt like I was creating my own thing and doing something for me. And then you were doing your thing, even though we were both coaching and you were still helping me with stuff and helping me like learn and grow. It was something that it just kind of felt like we're just doing our businesses.
Yeah, I think at the beginning, to answer the question, is that I thought they would coexist. I didn't see us bringing them together at the very beginning of all this.
I think one thing that was extremely helpful, regardless of if we ended up merging our businesses together or keeping them separate, was that going into the relationship, we both had an understanding of what we wanted out of life and what we wanted life to look like. And so I feel like that's something foundationally that a lot of people overlook is they just think, oh, I really love this person, which love is obviously a big part of it. But I think that your goals need to align. Otherwise, you end up just fighting each other without realizing it a lot of your time together.
Certainly. If the foundation of the goals is not in place, there's just going to be a lot of friction regardless. We see this within our clients in terms of one person wanting to change their habits and get their health into order. One of the hardest things for them to combat against, I suppose, would be the spouse not being on the same page or wishing that they were how they used to be, and that being a really hard friction point for them to progress into this better version of themselves that they're trying to create.
Mm-hmm. And within getting married, like we both knew we weren't trying to necessarily change the person and change what their goals were. Because I think people have that thought as well of like, oh, as things go, things will change. But my relationship before Alex, I very vividly remember sitting there visiting him and kind of my life flashing before my eyes of like, hey, if I'm wanting to do this and go all in on my business, like it is going to feel like there's a ton of friction. And I saw that he didn't want that for his life. And he wanted to have which nothing wrong with it, but he wanted to have a different type of lifestyle. And that was not aligned with what I wanted. And that was even a part of the reason that I ended the relationship, is it just felt like for what I want and to feel the most fulfilled, I need someone else. And then you entered the picture. So it worked out great.
Absolutely.
What was the first moment where you realized we could actually build something together? / when did we decide to combine forces?
I think the first time that I realized it was, I would say, pretty early on. I knew very early that you are going to be an amazing mother. I think that's like the first thing is I knew probably when we were dating that you are going to be an amazing mom. I think also when you are assessing how amazing a woman is, like look at their mom. And I see your mom and she is amazing as well. And so with that foundation, I knowing that, I would say the skills that were necessary for a business to really flourish, there are skills that I lack. And I'm aware of that. I'm self-aware enough to know that I do not carry some of those. Can they be taught? Yes. But do I want to spend the time and have the friction to learn those and hold the business back? Fortunately, I had you, and a lot of those skills that I lack, you carry. And that was probably understanding where that trade-off was allowed for us to have that foundation of we can do this together.
It felt like it was about a year into our marriage. And that first year, we've talked about it before, was very transformative for us. We learned a lot about communication. We learned a lot about each other. And it was something where, like we talked about before, it felt like the demographics and the people that we were working with were kind of separate. Over that year, things started to merge together. And it just was one day where it was kind of like, hey, why aren't we doing this together? It kind of feels like we're like rooting for the other person, cheering the other person on, but wouldn't this be so great to be able to do it together? And that was actually, going off of what you said, another question was, what strengths do each of you bring to the business and how did you discover your roles? And I think that was a big part of it, of being able to be self-aware enough and to not have an ego enough to be like, hey, you're good at this thing, I'm good at this thing, let's use those skills together, instead of it being like, I'm good at this, you're good at that, let's keep it apart.
Yes. I believe that one of the things that we had to get really good at and what we struggled at early was one of us getting the credit for things going well. I know for myself, at least, that at the beginning, I wanted to retain all the credit for things going well. Like I wanted to be the one who got the praise. But as we progressed and I found a place of true harmony in which no matter who got the praise, we were winning. And that probably, like us making the decision to join forces, definitely helped that progress forward and have that understanding.
I think another thing that could have been detrimental for a lot of people, but it ended up working in our favor, was soon after I joined the team, I actually started a prep, and you were my coach for that as well. And so that was something where it lined up within going into 2020, which we all know how that year happened. So not only were we forging our relationship within early in our marriage, we were figuring out how to be business partners and how to communicate with each other. Then we add on the other layer of coach-client dynamic. And especially in a prep, that makes it even more magnified of all the different emotions that go into it. But that forced us to have to learn how to communicate, because otherwise everything would come crashing down.
We also bought our first house in that time frame
in that
too.
time frame too. Yes, we did. We did all of those things.
Yeah. One thing that has been recurring throughout our life is that we just decide to pour it all on at once. We like to just jump into the deep end and figure it out. And that has recycled over the years.
Yes, either us jumping in or the universe just saying, let's do everything at once.
Very true. Yeah.
So how do we keep work mode and relationship mode separate, or do we?
You have to. I don't think that you would be able to mesh the two and retain happiness as well as quality of work within the business itself. So we do our absolute best with separating them. Now, our days are physique development. Like that is the largest part of our days. And if we go back to when we were in our apartment in 2018, we had so much time available to us. Mm-hmm. We did not understand that we had that much time available to us. And we just had poor organization / time management at the time. But we got to spend a lot of time together. Fast forward to now being in 2025 and having a staff that we work with in two very different roles within, just different roles within the business. I mean, I see you for breakfast. If I have a meeting with you throughout the day, I'll maybe see you then. And then I don't see you again until 7:30 at night, generally. And so that is one thing where I get such a limited amount of time with you that I have to separate it as much as possible, because if I don't separate it, then I get almost no time of you being my wife. And so it's a tool that came because of necessity.
Yeah, we've done a few different things over the years within learning that. And it was something where it's not like, oh, everything within work and life is separate, because it just can't be that way. But one thing that we've cultivated is just the ability to speak up in those instances. So it's not like we have this rule of, hey, once 6 p.m. hits, then we can no longer talk about work. Sometimes we do end up talking about work because we want to, or we're working through something and we're both in a good headspace to do it. But we kind of have a rule where if someone says, hey, I'm not in the headspace to talk about work right now, and we're not like actively in a work meeting, then the other person just accepts that and we move on. There's no hard feelings. There's no anything. It's just, okay, I'm not in the place for this right now. And I feel like that's really helped us of, we don't have to have this hard and fast of no work whatsoever at this time, but we kind of get to decide what's going to work best for us in that. But there's other times where, again, life bleeds into work and we kind of have to adjust from there. So we don't try to just be, this is completely separate, but being able to have boundaries around that to ensure that we are able to have that quality time as husband and wife, and then have productive time as owners.
I think there was some progression to those things coming to life. I want to say that we started with having hard cutoff times where we were not going to talk about work, though. And then we progressed into being able to speak up, because when we started to speak up and say, I don't want to talk about work right now, the other person would get their feelings hurt a little bit, because at the time it was very important to them and they needed to get that information out. And it felt like the other person maybe didn't care or whatever the case was, but their feelings were hurt. And then as we had more repetitions, we realized it wasn't something personal. It was that that person just wasn't in the space to be able to have that conversation at the time. And it's going to be better to hold off to have the conversation when both parties are on the same page. And so if you are in a relationship where you guys are trying to cultivate a business together, understand that there are just going to be stepping stones and there's going to be friction, but understand that you both are working towards the same goal and working together as a team.
And it was also something where I would, especially a few years ago, would get way too emotional during work meetings. And then we had to kind of figure out how to pull that apart of, hey, I'm getting emotional, and it's not that I'm trying to now pull a card on Alex or make him respond in a certain way, but I had to realize how my emotions were affecting him and his ability to do his job and to show up the absolute best. And so it was this like push and pull of, how do we need to show up for each other to make the most out of our work and to not have resentment from whether it be an assumption or just from how we're perceiving how that person is. So I feel like that's been a huge part, is just, and that's going to be a reoccurring theme, is like clear communication with each other and being able to have touch points so that we know exactly what to do, and clarifying when we are about to make an assumption. Because, for example, of that work and life mode, we do have a hard cutoff time as far as being at our desks. And again, sometimes we end up talking about work after that cutoff time. But it's like, hey, we are away from our desks at this time, and this is now time for us to either spend by ourselves or to spend together. And just the other day, you ended up having to be at your desk longer. I don't need to now be upset, because that's the exception, not the rule. It's not like every single day you're constantly going over that time and then you're disrespecting me. It's, in order to get everything done and to set myself up for success, I need to work this extra bit. And so in that, we were able to have a conversation of just, hey, how much longer are you going to be at your desk? And not in a way to make you feel bad for being at your desk, but to clarify where I needed to spend my time or what I could do with my time. Because it used to be that we didn't communicate as clearly, and then the other person would just feel like they're sitting there wasting their time waiting for the other person, and then have frustration that really didn't need to be there, where now we can cheer for each other and support the other person in those instances that the schedule might have to change, and still be able to make the most of our time as well.
Yes. Going back to the, you had talked about like you getting emotional within work conversations. I also had to work on communicating what I was trying to say far better. My only real my examples up until that point were in a sports setting where I'm with other aggressive dudes that were just like working towards a goal of winning this game. And so I spoke and still speak often in a very direct way. And that directness can be perceived or received in a way that's not what it's meant to be. And I had to learn to better communicate, as well as like, not everyone is just at the mercy of what what my emotions are. Like, I need to be cognizant of everybody and present things in a manner that can be received as best as possible. And I had to work on that, still working on that today. But I can look back 5 years ago to now, and I am 10x, 100x better than I was.
Well, we had to learn a lot about each other of even how to have meetings the most cohesively. If we've tried probably 5 to 10 different things of what's the best schedule for us to have meetings, what's the best cadence, what's the best way to present information to each other, because we've been through quite the amount of failures, so to speak, in that of just having many unproductive meetings, not being able to see eye to eye on things. And that's something that we've had to continue to refine of how that's presented. And I now knowing you, when you are direct or you're more, it's not even like harsh, because it's not you trying to be harsh. It's just your like passion and like feel for it as you go forward. And I had to learn not to take that personally. That's been like one of the hugest things that I've had to learn, is to not take things so personally, because I know for a fact he doesn't mean it personally. Yeah. And so we've had to have kind of that balance between us of how we present that and how we're able to like work through that.
Yes. Providing feedback is honestly one of the biggest skill acquisitions that I've had, because growing up, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but the way that I received feedback for either doing things right or doing things wrong was very direct and very stern. And I responded well to that personally, for better or for worse, I suppose. But that is also, that was my only example. Thus, I took that into my own feedback giving and all that, and realized that not everybody receives that the best.
We've already started to kind of talk about this, but do we have any rules in place to stop from work creeping into your personal life, or just to be able to help the dynamic?
We have the just speaking up when we don't have the bandwidth. I believe that also you and I look forward to just getting to have time together. Like, I work hard during the day. I'm more focused during the day, knowing that I get to spend the evening with you if I get these things done. Like, the quality of my time with you in the evening is dependent on the fact that I get these things done. If I don't get these things done and they linger on, well, now I'm worrying about this in the back of my head, and it's taking away from the limited amount of time that I get to spend with you. And so that's something that is a driving force, a motivator. And I notice it, like, let's say you have a hair appointment, which the hair appointments are 10 hours long in my eyes. And so in those days when I know I'm not going, like, she's not at the house, I notice my efficiency slows down. And I'm like, why is this happening? I don't have the driving force, the motivation. I'm going to be here by myself all day. And so I slow down with my work in those situations, which is really annoying. But
yeah, I think another thing is that we don't view things as 50-50, which is how I used to think things were, of like, I bring 50%, you bring 50% to the table, we add up to 100%. But the fact of the matter is, you're not always going to be able to bring 50% to the table. And that's what truly makes this work, is that we are teammates. So sometimes I come to the table with 70 and you come to the table with 30, or you'll be like, hey, I got 20. And I'm like, don't worry, I'll pick it up. I'll get the 80, and vice versa. But also sometimes we come to the table and you might be like, hey, I got 25. And I would be like, I got 15. And those are the days that we really approach with grace for each other, and understanding of, again, an expectation of what the day is going to be. And that just sets both of us up, but just speaking for myself, so much better, because I'm able to see what that push and pull is, and also being able to just meet you where you're at and know that you're going to meet me where I'm at too. And that's something that I always appreciate when it comes down to everything that we're doing on a daily basis, is I just know that you have my back through it, and we are going to figure it out together. So even the days that feel impossible or the problems that we don't have the answers to, I just know like we are going to figure it out. Even again, if we don't have the answer, we're at least going to take a step further, and we are going to figure that out together. together, whether that's you trusting me to make the decision or me trusting you to make the decision or us sitting there and discussing the decision, like we are able to take that next step together.
Yes. I would add that we have 100% understanding that there's not malicious intent behind things that are said or things that are done, or we do not have situations where it's like a get back for something that happened earlier. We have completely extinguished those things out of our relationship because it's just painfully unnecessary and childish to have in place.
Waste so much time.
Waste so much time, so much energy. Just speak up. Like if you've got a problem, speak up. And so having that base allows for you to be able to hear things in a way that is so beneficial. Like if you were to say something that potentially hurt my feelings, my first thought is, okay, my feelings are hurt. She did not say that maliciously. Where is that coming from? Is she having a hard time in her day? Is there somewhere that I can pick up some other slack to alleviate some of her stress? I'm going to work on those things. Is it pertaining to something I could have done simply better? I just did it mindlessly and it irritated her. Okay, I can do a better job with that thing. But having that foundation allows for the decisions to be so much more clear. And I was going somewhere else with that, but that was the gist of it. I think that's a tremendously important part, as well as speaking up, even though you may not have a complete thought. Mm-hmm. For instance, if an emotion is sparking and I'm feeling either upset or my feelings hurt or what have you, I may just say, what you just said bothered me. I don't know why it bothered me, but I'm kind of working through it. And I just want you to know that I'm working through it right now. And maybe in an hour or something, I'll have more of a collected thought on it. But I don't want you to think that I have, something going on that you're unaware of and you're wondering.
We have a ton of like clarifiers when we are speaking with each other, just to ensure of there's a baseline understanding, like you said, of like there's no malintent and like we are going to look out for each other. But when we realize the other person might be having a hard time or like you see them receive it in a certain way, then we will go the extra of like, hey, just to make sure I didn't mean it in this way, or, hey, I'm frustrated with the situation. I'm not frustrated with you. Or I actually am taking out my emotions on you because my day was a shit show and I apologize for that. And I think that those little moments that can feel like, well, this person should understand I'm going through that. Sometimes it's just nice to have it acknowledged, and it's nice for someone to see like the impact that they're having on you and be able to just say one simple thing about it. Like literally last night, you were picking on me for something, which like we roast each other all the time. So like that's no big deal. But you saw it was getting under my skin and I was a little exacerbated with you. And you were able to be like, hey, this is kind of misplaced. I'm sorry. We're done with that. And it was just like, we moved on. Like I didn't think about it the rest of the night. I didn't pay any mind to it. The only reason I remembered it is because I knew we were doing this podcast today. And I was like, you know what? That's a great example of us taking this forward, because we say what we mean and we mean what we say. Because early on in our relationship, if you were like, hey, what's wrong? I'd be like, nothing's wrong. When something was very clearly wrong. And that's something that we have also just ixnayed is like, if you say nothing's wrong, I'm going to take you at face value and nothing is wrong and we're going to move on from it. Now, I will make a little like asterisk here that sometimes it's not always the right time to talk about something. And that's something we had to learn too. There's a difference between talking about something later and sweeping something under the rug, or like outright lying of saying like, oh, nothing's wrong, even though there is something wrong. Sometimes I'll just be like, hey, we can talk about it later. And it's like, all right, we're going to keep moving from here, but we will come back to it. But it's not always the right time to say something. And that brings me back to us just talking about work after hours, is that it would be something where like I would be excited to talk about something, or I just come out of something to talk about it. But I had to realize he's not always in the place to receive it. And I need to be conscientious of not just like dumping information on him. So we actually had something come up with someone on the staff, and it was kind of like stressing me out. And I wanted to talk to him about it as like husband and wife. But I also knew that this was after work and that we both had long days. And it was something that we were having a meeting on a Monday, and it happened on like a Thursday or Friday. And instead of like just quote, ruining his weekend and just dumping it on him and making him worry about it. I took some time to kind of work through it. And then we were able to address it on Monday. And it was just like, oh, I don't need to immediately dump everything on him the second either the thought or the information comes to me. And I think that that was a huge thing for both of us.
Yes. All of this is in part to realizing that you don't have to like everything that you do. Like I would like to just dump all this information on you and give this information to you now, but the right thing to do is to wait until Monday at the meeting to give you this information, as well as I'm going to be able to better articulate this as well, because I'll have more preparation time and those things. So yeah, it's a sentiment to doing the right thing, not always what you want to do or like to do.
Yes, exactly. Low reps is best.
High reps is best.
Fruit is so
It's
good.
terrible for you.
You should lift heavy.
High reps,
Carbs
low
are
weight.
needed.
Keto
Squats
for
are
life.
bad for your
Squats
knees.
are great
You
for your
should
knees.
squat ass to
Knees over
grass.
toes.
It's fine. It fits my
Macros is
macros.
for idiots.
When there are so many mixed messages going around, it's hard to know what you should even do or focus on. But that's exactly where physique development one-on-one coaching comes in. You might have heard of online coaching or even hired a coach before, but we believe in teaching you the why behind what we do, while truly taking your life into consideration. We want to train, educate, and empower you to reach your goals and help you to stop spinning your wheels and just finally feel good. And hey, we're here to help you look good too. You need you. Your health is your wealth. So join Physique Development and let us be the last coach you ever need. So do you ever find it hard to switch off from business conversations at home?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what's going on within business. If we've got a lot going on, it's very difficult for me to turn off my brain. If there are like problems or challenges that are presented, my brain I'm tapped in. That's all I can think about. And that's one thing that I've had to really work through, because it would keep me up at night. I would go days with just like, this is the only thing I can think about. And so I've really had to make a conscious effort to get better about that. And the one tool that has helped me the most is that I have a notepad in my office. And with that, at the end of the day, if I have things that are lingering that are not closed loops, I will write it out on the notepad, and just any lingering thoughts that present after I write it down. And it is really helpful for me to get it out on paper and then leave that notepad in my office, close the door to my office, and it makes it feel like that is tomorrow's worries. It's not tonight's worries, it's tomorrow's worries. When I get back into the office, I will address it. And having that association to the room and the timing, I suppose, has helped tremendously.
And I think that, again, not only just both of us can say of, hey, I don't want to talk about work right now, but even sometimes to preface conversations, you'll be like, hey, can I talk to you about something about work real quick? And sometimes I'm like, yeah, for sure. And other times I'm like, I'm really not there right now. Like, you're not going to get anything helpful from me, and it's just going to cause more frustration. So those conversations not only help each person in the moment, but it also helps long term, because we're giving better quality focus and effort towards what we're actually discussing at the time, instead of just getting frustrated because you're really excited about something and I could care less at that moment. Where you even were wanting to tell me a content idea the other day, and I was like so emotionally drained, and you're like, "Ooh, I want to tell you about this idea." And I said, "You can tell me about it. I want to just preface, I'm likely not going to have like a strong emotional reaction right now. And I don't want you to take that the wrong way. If you're really excited and you want me to be excited right now, I just don't have it in me." And you were like, "You can't even ruin it. I'm going to tell you anyways." But sometimes it's like, okay, I'm going to tell you later because I want to be excited about this, so that you don't just think, I think your idea is stupid or anything like that.
Well, it was an amazing idea.
It was, and we executed it.
There was no you turning it down. It was such a good idea that there was no stopping
You're
it.
not wrong about that. Have you had to relearn how to communicate differently as business partners versus as a married couple?
I would say that communicating in business has allowed for us to expedite our communication as husband and wife, and vice versa. They feed off of one another. What we've come to strongly realize is that if the culture that we are wanting to cultivate within physique development has a core of love and family and camaraderie. Well, if we are the nucleus of that, we have to come 10 toes down on all of those facets if we are going to be leading the charge in that. And so for us to have love, camaraderie, and teamwork overall, it has to start with our marriage. And if our marriage isn't in a place where those things are thriving, then that can't be within the business. And so, and I've said this on the podcast a number of times, but our relationship needs to be at 100% for all of my other things to even have a possibility of being at 100%. And so nurturing that is my number one focus, our number one focus.
Yeah, there's actually a Harvard research done that found that 99% of your success, I'll state that again, 99% of your success is tied to your reference group, which is the people that you spend the most time with. And your significant other isn't just part of that group. They absolutely dominate that group. And especially in our dynamic of we're working and like married, but even if you aren't owning a business with your significant other, they are someone who is going to absolutely dominate that group because you are spending time with them. And that person has the most influence over your mindset, your habits, your trajectory in life. They are going to have a huge, huge impact on. And so I think that's something that we realized pretty early on, probably after the first year of marriage, of like, hey, how we communicate, how we work together, how everything goes from here matters on how we treat each other, what the foundation of this all is, and how enjoyable this is for the rest of your life. Because you have talked about it on the podcast of like, hey, I realized that if we didn't figure out our communication and our relationship, I'm just going to be miserable all the time. And I don't think either of us, I know neither of us want to be miserable all the time. And so it's putting in that effort for those things to be like, hey, this is about us truly like making this what we want it to be instead of working against each other, which is, we just see that a lot in relationships. And it's something where I just truly see you as my teammate in everything that we do.
Absolutely.
Have there been moments where stress of work spilled over into your relationship, and how do you navigate that?
Yeah.
No, never.
More
honey.
often than what we would probably like to admit, I imagine.
Yeah.
I think the way that we have worked through that, I don't think you work around it because you have to go through it. If you try to go around it, it's just going to mount and it's going to get worse and there's going to be a blow up point. And so by working through it, we avoid the blow up points. And I would say that definitely the first year, probably into the second and third year of our marriage, we would get to those boiling points of just breaking. I would say recognizing it as early as we possibly can, that this is where this is festering from, and communicating that as early as possible to the other person of last night's a good example where my day did not go how it was supposed to go. And I was releasing some of that frustration and picking on you, which is one of my fortes if I am in a stress state. So in that situation, I was able to recognize and just as soon as you see it, just say it out loud. It doesn't have to be a perfectly phrased thing. Just say it out loud. And then that can start the conversation of working through it. Because I know early on, I would recognize it and be like, I'm going to fix it. I'm not going to say anything out loud. I'm going to fix it myself. And then by fixing it myself, I just left her in a space where she was having to make assumptions. And I would say that's another strong point, is that leaving nothing up for assumption allows for there to be as much flowing clarity as possible. Because if we are having stress that's pouring past work and into our personal, that's something we have to work through together. And it goes back to the point of, depending on how much we can show up for each other, show up for ourselves, and then, making those adjustments specifically. I think one thing that may come to people's mind of stress within work that we haven't dealt with much is like something we disagree on within the business itself, that would linger of us disagreeing and then it bleeding into our evening, I suppose. On that, we have just absolute trust in the roles that we've both taken on. And if that's the decision that you have made within a employee hire, for example, I have full trust that that was the best option that was available to be made. And so, things like that, I would say, get very clear on the trust within those roles. If you don't think that that person's fit for that role within the job, and that's creating a lot of stress on your relationship, speak up on why you think that's the case. Like, where do you think that person's falling short? And if you think that you could potentially do it better, then let's see it, buddy.
Do it.
Let's buck up.
Don't just point out problems, do something about it.
Exactly. And that's another, foundational point for us, is that if you're going to chitter chatter about it, let's see some action be put into place. But if you're not going to put any action in place, shut the fuck up.
Yeah. But that's a great example of like, there have been situations where I have been in charge of hiring, and I hired someone that wasn't the best fit for the job. I obviously didn't do it intentionally and was like, hey, I'm going to hire the worst person or a horrible fit, and this is going to make my life more stressful. It's going to make the business more stressful, and I'm doing this to spite someone. Obviously, I didn't do it that way. With all of the knowledge that I had, I made the best decision that I could. But it was something that was causing stress within the business, which it did spill over to our relationship, just because the business's well-being does impact our personal lives.
Very much so.
Especially like the financial side of the business impacts our personal lives. And so there was like festering frustration there, understandably, of Alex being in a place of like, you said this person was going to perform at this level and they haven't performed. And so what are you going to do about it? Or like, what do you have to say for it? Or he would say things of just not being the happiest with somebody that I had hired. And I was able to speak up instead of internalizing it and being like, Alex thinks I'm horrible at my job. Alex thinks this is all my fault. I spoke up and I was like, you saying those things makes it feel like I am all in the wrong, that you don't trust me to hire people, and like so on and so forth. And he was able to see my side, but also be like, just because I said this thing doesn't mean that that fully reflects on you. But if you are the person doing the hiring, stand 10 toes on the person you hired or change it. And so we are able to have a lot of very straightforward and direct conversations with each other, again, without getting feelings hurt, more so my feelings than anyone else's. And like, that's something I had to learn about myself. Sure. Is like, I was just more sensitive to things. You weren't being like an asshole. Sometimes maybe your tone could have been better, but like, you weren't being horrible to me. I just was taking it very personally. But I was able to vocalize that, so it wasn't something like steaming under the surface of me constantly thinking Alex is doubting me. I was able just to speak it out loud, him reassure me where his head is at, but also him hold me to a standard of, if you are going to be in charge of this, be in charge of it. And if you're not, then take what you're not going to be in charge of and do something about it. And so I think that that's just been of like very direct, honest communication, and like our core values within physique development, I would say, are pretty close to the core values within our relationship. Like one of them being extreme ownership of, when you make a mistake or when you do something great, you own up to it. It's not, oh, I'm going to try and make it that they didn't see that. It's like, hey, I did hire the wrong person. This was my fault. I don't need to sit here and guilt myself. I don't need you to tell me how bad everything was. I just need to be able to take ownership and take the next step forward. And that's something that I've always appreciated, is that I know that you're not going to try and like sneak around it or lie around it or anything like that. It's just like, we can be upfront and we can move the boat forward and do what we need to do with that.
Yes. Hiring is easily the hardest thing for us to do. Just as a side note, hiring is far more difficult than I could have ever imagined it to be. And over the last 3 years, that's been the name of the game, is hiring and building out our team. And we had no experience going into doing this. And expending your own time, expending your capital, and learning it through the trenches is a humbling and very like ego death experience for everyone. Because in the way that I was bringing up my frustrations with, I know who you're talking about.
Interesting.
Bring up those frustrations was a childish way for me to bring it up, because I did not have a plan of action to change it. I wanted you to understand that I was upset.
Yeah.
And I was not presenting it in a way that was actually productive to the situation. I just wanted you to be as upset as I am. And I was just trying to bring you down to where I was. And that's something that we have eliminated and worked on consciously to catch in the moment and readdress in a more productive way.
Yeah.
And when one of the big pivots in that moment was pivoting from doing that to what are we missing on in the hiring process that is bringing in the wrong people for this role? What can we identify that is our shortcoming, and what are we going to change in the future for this to not happen or lessen the possibility of this ever happening again? And by having that shift in the question, but also just the structure of the conversation allows for everyone to come to the table in a way of like, we're working together as a team to build up. We're not here to try and blame the other person. We're here to work together as a team.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And I did think of one other thing when it comes to like spilling over into the relationship is that if something is coming up and we know it's going to demand a lot of us within work, again, we always try to speak up about that. So sometimes I'll just be like, hey, I have all of these calls today, or I have all of these meetings. I might be a little bit less available, or I might just be like really gassed at the end of the day, or I don't have time to make one of your meals, so you're going to have to make it. And those little things of just the awareness of like, while we both do share Google Calendar, and that's actually something we'll get into here with one of the other questions, like it is so helpful to just know that of, again, even the instance of yesterday, you saying like, hey, I'm going to have to work late and this is the situation. That one thing helps me so much to not be sitting there waiting for you or have a different understanding of what the day was going to be. It also made me start to think of, okay, if he's working late, I know he obviously doesn't want to. What is something that I can do for him that is going to help in this? And I've learned a lot that me just sitting there asking you what's going to help you isn't really that helpful. But I know that like acts of service is a huge thing for you. And like me feeding you is its own love language. And so being able to have food ready for you as soon as you were done and be prepared for that, have other things set up for you so that you didn't have to do it as soon as you left. And that's an example of like, there is going to be push and pull. It's not always that 50-50. And we don't keep score of that either of like, well, I helped 3 days this week and you only helped 1 day. It's like, it's all coming back around and like, we are just in this. But again, that like disclaimer at the beginning of the day or that disclaimer going into whatever the situation is like so helpful for my mind personally of just like, all right, now I know what's going to happen.
Yeah. So communicate.
Well, we kind of talked on this, but how do you handle situations where one of you strongly disagrees with another for a business decision?
If there is a disconnect in whatever decision is being made, I think that it is a matter of expressing why that is the case, like being very definitive within statistics or data or other reason as to why the decision is whatever you feel to be right. And if we go through that whole conversation, I don't know if we've had a situation where it's like, okay, I don't see where you're coming from, and you're still just egregiously wrong. There have been situations where I disagree with you, but this is your role. This is your thing that you are in charge of. So I trust you. And you also have to understand that if this does not pan out, I told you so. And I
with love.
Yeah, with love. I'm going to hold on to the opportunity to say that at the end of this because I am laying out why these things are probably not going to actually occur, and where I'm seeing it from. And we're not going with my decision. We're going with your decision. Do you feel okay with taking that responsibility? And if that person says, I am 100% okay with taking that responsibility, at that point, we make that decision.
Yeah. And someone might be listening and be like, that sounds kind of petty that you're excited to say, I told you so. But it is just, first, we're both competitive people and we are fine with roasting each other and having good natured fun. But it's also of like, if you're going to be 10 tones down on a decision, then be on that decision and like prove me wrong. Like, go ahead and try, because I'm rooting for our success, but I also still want to be right. And so it's something that it's a good back and forth between us of like, oh, I've actually vetted through this. I'm deciding this, even if he doesn't believe it to the same degree, or even if he doesn't fully agree, I am going to still like move forward with that. And I think like it really another part, because when I think about a specific thing that we had disagreed on, because I had to rack my brain a little bit of like, have we had like these huge disagreements on something? And one of them was like you taking on less clients because you were going to be doing more work. Because I had already made the decision a few years ago, and I had basically cut my roster in half and then in half again. And that was a very hard financial decision to make. And that was a very hard personal decision to make. And we had come to a head of like, okay, I'll do this first and then you do it. And you were basically like, I don't want to do it. I don't see the point of doing it. I don't think that we're in the place to do it. And so to a certain degree, I also had to let you figure it out on your own. So I think that we both have that understanding of like, we're going to push each other. We're going to present that information. We're going to talk about it. But sometimes the person has to come to that conclusion by themselves. And so there would be times where I'm like, all right, if we're not going to make this change, then like keep doing what you're doing. Let me know how that works out for you. And he literally had to keep doing it and show to himself, oh, wait, I can't do it this way, to then make that next change. But I couldn't push his hand with that. It wouldn't have been beneficial because you would have just ended up like resenting me for it. So it's kind of like, we kind of have to do it both ways to figure it out.
Yes, I struggle with always thinking I could do more work all the time. I still struggle with that on a day-to-day basis.
We both do.
Even as we're talking about it right now, I'm saying to myself, I can handle more clients. And I look at my calendar, I'm like, there is no shot of me handling more clientele. I think that I was going to say something and I have lost my train of thought.
Well, I thought of something else, so I'll pick up where you left off. I think one thing within disagreements, and especially within like us being a husband and wife and being the owners, is keeping a united front for the team. So this doesn't mean that we can never disagree in front of the team, but we're not going to like outright like fight and have a whole conversation where we haven't figured out our own stuff, because it is very important, as we've noted, of like, we are the nucleus of this. We need to come as a united front. We need to make sure we're on the same page. So there will be times where it's like, hey, Alex and I are going to meet about that, and we'll come back and like talk to you guys about it because we're still figuring it out, instead of trying to like hash it out or talking about the other person to people on the team, because that would be so uncomfortable if like you were on a team, and I'm sure this happens to people, but whether it's the bosses are in a relationship or not, of like they're fighting in front of you and going over something where you're just kind of like, I feel like I shouldn't be a part of this. And I feel like that's been something that we've just subconsciously and consciously done, of like, we're going to come to this with like the same front on this, of this is what we're going to do and this is what we're going to move forward with.
Well, it stifles contribution. If the two people that are in the leadership roles are arguing about possible outcomes, the contribution from the remainder of those who are involved in the meeting are not going to say anything. They're just going to sit there and be like, can we move on? This is uncomfortable. And so that's the last place that you want a team to be. One of the things that we want to have is everyone feeling comfortable to speak up and to have contribution and be creative collaboratively. And to do that, we have to come with a united front and have an environment that fosters open communication. And arguing as leadership roles, that does not foster communication.
Yeah. And it's just like, again, it's not that we never disagree in front of anyone else. Like, we have conversations, but it also depends on what the meeting is, what we're talking about. But I think it's important for people to see that we can both have different opinions, but we're always going to decide on one and not try to undermine the other person once we've decided on a decision that we're going forward with.
And that would be probably something that was at the beginning of running the business together, that I was not a helpful hand in. So all through school, I was the cool, funny, sporty guy.
You're still that to me.
I didn't want to show that I cared too much. I didn't want to give too much effort, but I still got decent grades. I still did very well in sports, those different things. And so I liked not being showing effort, I suppose. But I also liked being a distraction. I liked the attention of being a distraction in situations. And so as I grew up and stopped being a child, I like in situations early on, if I disagreed with what you said, I wanted it to be very known on my face and my body posture and those things. I wanted people to know I did not agree. And that just simply took away from the authority and leadership that you have and directly undermined you, not in a way that I was trying to undermine you, but that's what was happening. So again, a lot of this is just me going from a child to an adult.
Both of us going from a child to an adult.
Are you sick and tired of your glutes not growing? Turning around in the mirror and seeing a board for a booty? I've been coaching for nearly a decade, helping thousands of women reach their goals. The most common goal? Grow my glutes. Women in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and even 60s able to grow their glutes with the guidance of my training programs. And for all this time, I've kept my best glute growth secrets only for my one-on-one clients. And that changes today. We just released our 12-week glute growth program in the PD training app. It is a 4-day program with exercise and volume adjustments every 3 weeks. You can easily access the program through our app and track every single workout. Each exercise will have a detailed video teaching you exactly how to perform each and every movement. And guess what? I am no longer gatekeeping. I'm sharing every single one of my best glute growth secrets inside this program because you are awesome and I want you to have this program. I'm going to give you $25 off, making it a fraction of what you spent at Starbucks this past month. Use code POD. The link to purchase will be in the description. Now let's get back to the show.
This next question, we have already touched on some of it, but I think that there's a few other things we can say is how has running a business together made your marriage stronger? Which communication is at the top of that for sure. And just, again, that teammate mentality, which has been so integral for both our relationship and the business.
I believe that the most important thing in a strength of relationship is going through hard stuff. And we have made the executive decision to do all hard things together.
Only hard things.
And within that, it has fostered such a strength to our relationship that feels as strong as steel. And it comes from us being teammates in some of the hardest moments of our life. I mean, we went through a 2-year stint of, you look at 2022 to 2024, really 3 years, I suppose. We decide that we're going to flip this business on its head. Well,
or to strip it down for parts.
even before that, we make a huge life change, move here. We increase our mortgage by a lot. We make a lot of financial decisions that were better for the future of our life. And then we decide a few short months after that, hey, this is how we've made money up until this point. This is not how we're going to do it moving forward. We're going to strip this all the way back down to the beginning, basically, and restart with a whole different understanding, which was the right decision. Mm-hmm. But holy moly, was that painful.
And that's probably a decision, like that's one that was very hard for us. But you were able to say, if you're the CEO and you're making this decision, then make the decision. And that's something I always will appreciate and still currently do appreciate is like the trust and belief you had in me instead of just like, it was very uncomfortable for both of us. I cannot say that enough, that it was such an uncomfortable decision, but it was one that like you were able to trust me enough and to lean into it to allow it to happen. And not like I needed your permission, but like you are part that you could have actively worked against me and against what our success was. But you were like, if this is the decision we're making, like, let's make it. Like, let's not go back and forth on this. Let's go all in on it.
This is November of 21.
Around there. Yeah.
So, I mean, and to be fully transparent with everyone, like I just now feel like
literally,
I'm not joking.
Literally.
I'm not joking. I just now got comfortable with it all. 2025, February of 2025.
I cannot emphasize enough how true that is.
Like I just got comfortable with it and feel like things are starting to work. Mm-hmm. Like that's how difficult from November of 21 to February of 25 has been. And that's just, scratching the surface.
Absolutely.
And so we strip it down and we make that decision, and I put all of my trust in you. This is a lot of weight that you're taking. This is a huge change that we are committing to that is going to be, again, far better for the future of the business. But my gosh, is it what feels like the worst thing that we could do for ourselves at the moment.
And trust and belief in me when I had zero experience doing the job. I just need to emphasize that because it might be like, yeah, of course I would trust and believe in either my business partner or my spouse. But let me remind you, my degree was in broadcast journalism. I decided partway through my degree that I was actually going to become a personal trainer, learned how to become the best coach that I could be, and said, you know what? I know nothing about business. I think I'm going to run a business and completely change everything up. And it's something where still learning, still growing, but your trust in me at that time when I might have not quote unquote deserved your trust and your belief was again, something I'll always be grateful and thankful for.
Of course. And I think the thing that I always hung my hat on is that I'm going to be with physique development till either I die or physique development dies. That is,
till the wheels fall off.
We are one and the same. And I also knew that if everything blew up in our face, I still had you, and we were going to figure it out from there regardless. If it didn't work out, I'm willing to work until whatever to get it fixed. And so with that foundation and the trust and potential that I saw in you, and I knew your work ethic, I knew your competitive nature, I knew your willingness and what you saw for our family moving forward, and understanding that physique development is a foundational piece to that family, that understanding all of that, if it was going to work, it was only going to work with you. And so we make that decision, very difficult. Mike Strange decides, well, not he does. He doesn't.
Well, he did decide just to give up. Said sayonara.
My father-in-law, Sue's dad, comes down with cancer, and it is a shake I think a shake is putting it lightly, but a very difficult thing for us to deal with personally. Probably the most difficult thing I have ever dealt with in my life. And it was so difficult that I believe the trauma itself has meshed 2022, 23, and majority of 24 all together to where I have a very difficult time recollecting timelines at all. And we worked through that. We both did our therapy separately, working through those things for ourselves. And all of those things, and I'm shortchanging the weight of all of them, allowed for us to continue to foster this steel of foundation that we have to our relationship and the bond that we have because we've worked through so much hard together, and continue to. And because of that, our trust in one another is through the roof as well. We've shown up when the other person has put 100% trust in what needs to be done. We have watched the person show up time and time again when they did not have a whole lot to give and continue to show up. And so you're able to continue to recall those moments as you continue to work together as a team. And those building blocks are the reason why it's going to continue to blossom and continue to get greater over time.
I mean, you are fully the reason I work on the days that I don't want to. It's for the future that I know that we both want. It's for the dreams that have yet to come true. And it's the ultimate amount of respect that I could give you and to myself to continue to show up in those moments. And while there are many things that I pull on when I don't want to do work, truly at the end of that rope, when it's I should just give up, or maybe not today, it's knowing that you are working just as hard and you are showing up and you are in there doing your thing. And I couldn't live with myself to know that I'm letting you down and in turn letting myself down constantly of not putting in that effort, not showing up to bat and not showing up and getting that extra rep in when it would have been so much easier not to. And again, it just comes back to the point of like we, at the core of it, no matter if we're talking husband and wife or business owners, like we are teammates and you have my back and I have your back. And that's also something that we love. I think it's Jim Rohn who has said of it's not just like, I'll take care of you and you take care of me. It's I'll take care of me for you and you take care of you for me. And I feel like we exemplify that time and time again of it truly feels like the ultimate sign of like respect and love for you. And I can't sit here and tell you that I love you and that I respect you and I care about your dreams and I care about our future if my actions aren't matching that every single freaking day. And that even, again, for me to take care of me, that means making sure that I eat enough in a day. That means taking time to go on a walk. That means taking time to go work out. Like that was a huge reason I'd put it on my story yesterday of why I was so proud of you. Yeah, I would have loved if we both would have cut off work at the same time and spent time together. But I was so freaking proud that you first showed up, did what you needed to do when you didn't want to do it. And you also went on a walk outside when I know in the past it would have been so easy to cast yourself to the side, which doesn't help me at all. Like selfishly, it doesn't help me when you don't take care of yourself. Like it's not just like, oh, I want you to do these things like for your health. It's because your health and how you take care of yourself directly affect our work, directly affect our relationship, and just directly affect how you can show up every single day. So like you taking that walk and then you took a break, you wanted to work out for longer. You went in there for 30 minutes and went back to your desk, which is one of the hardest things to do when it's that late at night and it's that dark, and you still freaking did it. So yeah, I can show up and do this work when I don't want to because I know the other person on the side of my team is doing the same freaking thing.
Amen. I love you.
I love you. So it works. So carrying on with a few more questions, we're finishing up here, but do you ever take time apart intentionally, or do you find you thrive spending so much time together?
I would annoy you if I was with you all the time because
hence why we don't have the same office.
if we worked in the same office, I would just talk to Sue the whole time.
We'd get nothing done.
There's a lot of things that go on in my brain. My brain is constant. It's bouncing ideas 24/7. And if I have this pretty blonde girl to talk to that can generally bring some of my crazy ideas to life, I'm just going to start blurting them out. So it's better for us to work separately. On the topic of just like in general, we both need time to ourselves. I don't know if you would fully agree with this, but I do feel that I probably need,
for sure.
okay. I need more time by myself. I think this originates for a couple of different things, but where I see it to be the most helpful to me is that, like if I have days full of check-ins, Monday through Thursday, I'm recording a lot of check-in responses. And so if I have a very heavy day, whether it be like emotionally for the clients, things that they're dealing with within their personal life or things that we're working on together, and I'm just like pouring into that, it's very difficult for me to, like, I didn't have anything left for that. And at that time, it's just better for me to have time for myself. And early in our relationship, when that would occur, which it happened way more previously, I don't get to that point near as often. When it happened early on, there was just a disconnect. I didn't know how to articulate that that's what I was dealing with. And you, on your side, were feeling like, oh, you just don't want to spend time with me. And that was not helpful because then it just had festering frustration. And now that we have a better understanding, one, how to articulate what we're navigating through, but then also having an understanding of those things, then we're able to speak up in those situations and take it for what it's worth and move on, have the time to ourselves and be good.
I mean, we absolutely love spending time together, and like some people might think it's crazy of working together and like doing everything together that we would get more tired of each other. But I think that part of that is, again, giving each other space when we need it and allowing it to be exciting when we do spend time. We're able to be present in those moments. And I think that we just have such intention within what we do. If we know I can't be present for you and I can't like really give you what you need because I, again, need to take care of myself, like we have respect for that and understanding for that. But it's also, there's times where we might need to be doing things for ourselves, but we're even like in the same room so we can still like spend time semi together. So we've just kind of cultivated that for ourselves of what that looks like. So sometimes it looks like Alex going and playing some video games and me sitting upstairs and reading a book. And sometimes that's me going down to the basement to read my book while he plays his video games because we haven't gotten a lot of actual time together, but we still need time apart. And so we've just kind of put together what works for us and how that matters. But I think it's very important to have time apart, regardless of how much time you spend together, whether it's to work on yourself or just to have alone time. I think it's very, very important to have that.
If you're listening to this and you're feeling like, I want to apply this, use it as an example and make your own version of what it is. Like maybe exactly what we do works for you, but I would say majority of it is like a portion or a version of what we do is going to work for you. And so it's like, this is right for our relationship. It doesn't mean that it is right for your relationship and the dynamic that you guys have from a relationship standpoint. There are foundational pieces here for sure, but there are more, specific things that you've got to customize this a little bit.
And I think one thing that we haven't really mentioned when it comes to like our time together and quality time, like, yes, we have things like we watch football together or we have different shows that we watch together, but we always try to prioritize at least 30 minutes, if not more, of sitting like without TV on or anything like that to just sit and talk with each other. And I think that that's been so important for us and our like romantic relationship and just like our relationship as husband and wife to be able to flourish more, because it's not that, hey, every conversation we have is about business. A lot of them are. Like, it's not 50-50 by any means, but it's the fact of, hey, we're going to at least have 30 minutes that we're sitting here without a TV on and just talking with each other. And sometimes we're talking about goofy stuff. Sometimes we're talking about emotions, and it's basically like we're having a therapy session. And sometimes we're just filling each other in on stuff. And I think that that's been very, very integral in our relationship as well.
Yes, I can't. The value of spending 30 minutes to an hour and most times more than that in the evenings, just being able to sit and talk, listen to music, doing all that has been invaluable for us because I've been able to learn more about you. I've been able to learn more about our relationship and a lot of conversations that I don't think we would have had without that time.
I couldn't agree more. Have you had to shift traditional gender roles in business versus marriage?
Shift traditional gender roles. That is, I guess.
Yeah. We've just had to figure out again what works for us. So there was part of like you talking about earlier of like wanting the credit all for yourself and having that ego of then when it came to like me being the CEO and making decisions, that was kind of a shift that had to happen as far as like you used to being in charge of those things and leading those things and then having to shift that of this is now the role that I play in here. But I think that like outside of that, again, we've just had to figure out what works for us. And it's not just, oh, because you are the woman, you do X. And because I'm the man, I do X. It's really just based on what time we have and based on what's going on, whose responsibility is what. And I feel like that's just been at the core of it, of figuring out what works for us instead of like what's traditional.
What would be traditional roles in a male-female business perspective?
Like me being your assistant and like me being below you versus like you being the leader.
That's crazy. Well, I will tell you that if the roles were reversed, things would not be going this well. Okay. There would be a lot of things that were, this is like being a CEO, I'm self-aware enough that that's not how I roll. Like I would be very quick to fire. That's one thing, is that I would be doing a lot of things emotionally. Like I would be, I'd get frustrated, boom, you're gone. Who's next? And then it would be so dumb. It was just not my role. And so I think having self-awareness and being able to recognize your talents and where you lack talent is the most important thing. But I also don't know if you're able to really get to a point within business that is able to support employees and those different things without that.
Yeah.
Like I talked about how difficult that decision was to make in November of 21. If we didn't make the decision then, we would have continued to have the challenges that were present at that time, and we would have come to the same decision just at a later time.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it would have been even harder. Like, it was a really hard decision to make in that point, but every month that we would have pushed it off, it would have just gotten even harder and even harder. That would have probably driven us to a point that it would have been more likely to give up rather than continue to work through those things.
And I feel like we're just also, again, like upfront with each other about what's going on and what needs to be done. So there was an instance where there was a lot going on with work, and I didn't feel like I could delegate any of that actual work to you. But something that you could have helped with was getting the dogs fed and letting them out in the morning. And so we were able to have that conversation, and you were able to help from that side, even though it was like work stuff I was stressed about. Something like that was able to help me out. And we were able to, again, just figure out what we needed to divide within our tasks to be able to be the most conducive between the both of us.
Absolutely.
All right, last question that we got here. If you could give one piece of advice to other couples considering working together, what would it be?
Focus on your communication. Make that the priority, and be willing to have hard conversations. If there was anything that held us back at the beginning from making greater progress in strengthening the business, strengthening our relationship, is just avoidance of uncomfortable conversations, and having a fear of what the other person's response is going to be. I think, that being the core of it, but you could also say that those things are just the core of having a strong relationship in general. But that would be my advice, as well as have complementary skills. Like, if you come into this whole thing with the same skill set and you're like, we're going to not need other people and we're going to do this ourselves, you're going to be up a creek. Like, that's going to be tough.
Communication is definitely top notch. And then I think sharing a Google Calendar is a game changer, because if you guys are doing a bunch of things together, it is so freaking helpful to see what the other person's calendar is and what all is going on, to be able to then also plan things and not have to ask a million questions. It is so helpful. And just having meetings where it could feel like, oh, we talked during breakfast or we talked during that. We don't need to have like a meeting between the two of us. But we realize that, again, we're having breakfast. We're not talking about work. So we wouldn't address everything. And it would be that we are kind of putting our conversations on the back burner to like try and be considerate of each other's time, where it's just like, these are conversations we need to have. Like, let's set a meeting, let's go over it. And that can feel kind of awkward of like, let me set a meeting with you, even though we live together and we go through that. But we have meetings like for life stuff of like, hey, what all do we have going on this month? Or what does this week look like? And then we have meetings for work stuff to be able to discuss those same things so that we're on the same page. We have our expectations matched up, because communication is obviously a huge part of it, but like unmanaged or unsure expectations is like a sure way to have so much frustration and like butting heads for no reason. And so really being able to talk about like what the expectations were or what we needed from that person, just so helpful, instead of feeling like, oh, that's kind of like they're doing that way, I'm doing this way. It's like, no, let's figure this out.
Absolutely. And I'm getting distracted because the dogs have become restless in here. But this has been an amazing conversation.
It has been. And I'm also getting distracted. So we'll wrap it up. Again, we know our strengths and weaknesses, and we are going to go ahead and wrap it up here. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Hopefully you were able to learn some new things about us or how we handle things. And we'll catch you in the next one.
Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel.
And share with a friend all the different things.
We've got to stop waiting to say this at the end.
Bye.